The first time Silas Mercer heard her raise her voice in his house, she was standing in the kitchen with one child behind each leg and a shotgun in her shaking hands. She looked half-starved, half-furious, and all done with fear. The barrel was pointed at his chest, though both of them knew she did not truly mean to fire. Her hair had come loose. Her sleeves were rolled past her elbows. There was flour on one cheek and a bruise near her wrist that had not been there the day before. When she spoke, her voice was thin with anger and pride. "If you aim to throw us out, say it plain. I won't beg." Silas stopped in the doorway and stared at her. The room smelled of bread and smoke and the hard mountain wind he had carried in on his coat. The little girl pressed her face into the woman's skirt. The boy held a wooden horse with both hands like it might save him. Silas slowly removed his gloves and set them on the table. Then he said, quiet as if he were speaking to a skittish mare, "I brought a preacher, not a notice. So tell me, ma'am, do you still need a husband or only a witness?" Her name was Eliza Hart, and 3 days earlier she had stepped down from a stagecoach in Black Hollow with 2 children, one torn valise, and the last of her courage tied up behind her ribs. She had not come to that Montana town looking for mercy. Mercy was too thin a thing to build a future on. She had come looking for a name strong enough to stand in a courtroom and keep a greedy neighbor from taking the only land her dead husband had left behind. Black Hollow sat low between ridges where the wind came fast and the dust stayed mean. Men there remembered every debt and every weakness. Women were measured in whispers before they ever opened their mouths. Eliza knew the look people gave a poor widow with children. She had seen it in Colorado camps, in wagon towns, in church yards after funerals. Pity when you were lucky, hunger when you were not. She had no room left for either. She saw Silas Mercer before anyone pointed him out. He stood near the hitch rail outside the mercantile, tall and still in a dark coat, one hand resting on the post as if the whole street belonged to him and bored him besides. He was not handsome in a soft way. He looked carved from hard weather and long silence. Folks said he had pulled silver from the hills before he turned 25, bought cattle with the money, and built the Mercer spread into the richest place in 3 counties. Folks also said half the unmarried women in western Montana had tried to catch his eye and failed. Eliza crossed the street before her fear had time to turn her back. Her daughter, May, clung to her left hand. Her son, Toby, stumbled at her right. When she stopped in front of him, he looked first at the children, then at the paper in her hand, then at her face. His eyes were gray and unreadable. "Mr. Mercer," she said. His chin dipped once. "I was told you keep your word when you give it." "Depends what kind of word." She lifted the folded deed, worn soft at the seams. "Then tell me this. Do you need a wife or a witness?" That caught the whole street quiet. Even the blacksmith paused with his hammer in the air. Silas did not move. A wagon rolled past behind them, slow and creaking. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and stopped. "What exactly are you asking me, ma'am?" Her mouth felt dry, but she forced the words out. "My husband bought a tract near Cold Creek. Good water, good grass. He died before he could fence it proper. The man whose land borders ours says the deed is false and the county judge is ready to agree with him. My barn was burned 2 weeks ago. My mare was cut loose. Next time they said it would be my children." She held his gaze though her knees had begun to tremble. A poor widow can shout truth till her throat gives out. No one hears a thing, but a wife of Silas Mercer might be heard. His face stayed hard. "You want my name?" "I want my children to sleep through one night without waking to fire." A gust of wind lifted dust around their boots. May pressed closer. Toby stared up at Silas with the solemn look of a child too tired to be curious anymore. "You don't know me," Silas said. "No. You don't know what sort of husband I'd make." Eliza let out a breath that was nearly a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "I don't need a sweetheart. I need a man no thief wants to challenge in open daylight." He stared at her long enough that the town began to breathe again around them. Then he said, "Come with me." He turned toward the church at the far end of the street. Eliza stood frozen only a moment. Then she gathered the children and followed. The preacher, an old man named Reverend Pike, was sweeping dust from the aisle when Silas walked in. He looked up, frowned, and leaned both hands on the broom. "Mercer, this looks sudden." Silas stopped in front of the altar. "We need vows." Reverend Pike blinked once. Eliza heard May sniff behind her. Toby had found a hymn book and was rubbing the worn gold letters with one finger. The preacher looked from Silas to Eliza to the children and seemed to understand enough not to ask foolish questions. There was no bouquet, no ring, no music, just a few words spoken under a plain wooden cross while the afternoon light fell through dusty windows. Eliza's hand stayed cold the whole time. Silas's voice never wavered. When it was done, Reverend Pike closed his Bible and cleared his throat as if something about the whole thing had caught in it. Silas turned to her. "You're a Mercer now." That was all. No kiss, no smile, no promise beyond the one already made. He brought them to his ranch before dark. The Mercer place sat beyond a stand of cottonwoods where a creek bent north and the pasture ran long toward the mountain ridge. It was a large house by frontier measure, built solid and square with a broad porch and a red barn standing watch beyond it. Eliza had seen fine homes before from a distance. She had never been invited inside one. Silas showed them 2 rooms upstairs, one for her and one for the children. "You won't be bothered here," he said. "Mrs. Keene comes twice a week for washing. I can send her away if you'd rather manage the house yourself." "I'll manage it." He nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Supper's at sundown. Eat if you're hungry." Then he left her standing in a room that smelled faintly of cedar and old winter quilts. The first night, Eliza slept with a chair braced beneath the door latch. She hated herself for it, but not enough to stop. She woke twice to the sound of the wind striking the shutters and once to May crying from a dream. Each time she lay still, listening for footsteps that never came. By morning, Toby had found a polished banister to slide his hand along, and May had discovered a patch of yellow wildflowers near the porch steps. Small things, but children built courage from scraps. Eliza found the kitchen, tied on an apron left hanging by the stove, and set biscuits in the oven before the sun cleared the ridge. She needed work in her hands. Work made a strange place feel less sharp. She was rolling dough when Silas stepped in from outside. He had already been out with the horses. The cold came in with him. So did the smell of leather and pine. He stopped when he saw breakfast laid out. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." He removed his hat and set it on the table. There was a fresh cut across one knuckle. She noticed it because she noticed everything that might matter now. May and Toby came in a minute later, shy and clean-faced, and sat where she told them. Silas took the chair at the far end. The children watched him as if he were some large, quiet animal that might turn gentle if no one moved too fast. May was the first to speak. "Do you have horses?" Silas looked at her. "I do." "Can I see them after breakfast?" "If your mother says yes." May turned at once to Eliza. Something in that made her chest tight. He could have said no. He could have ignored the child. Instead, he had placed the answer in Eliza's hands. After the meal, Silas took them to the barn. Toby held Eliza's skirt until Silas lifted him onto the lower rail and showed him a mare with a white star on her forehead. May asked 10 questions in 10 breaths. Silas answered every one of them, not warmly, not coldly either, just plain, like children deserved truth. That evening, after the little ones had fallen asleep in a nest of quilts, Eliza went downstairs to bank the fire. She found Silas at the table with a lamp lit low and her deed open beside a second paper covered in neat figures. "You read land records?" she asked. "I read anything men used to steal." She stood still a moment. "You believe me then?" He looked up. "I believed you in town." "Then why marry me so fast?" His eyes held hers. "Because if I had waited till morning, someone would have tried to stop it." The fire snapped softly behind her. She moved closer to the table. "And what do you want in return?" His jaw shifted once. "A quiet house, honesty, no games." "You'll have all 3 from me." He folded the deed with surprising care. and handed it back. Their fingers brushed. It was nothing, only skin on skin. Still, it startled her. "Court's in 4 days," he said. "You'll ride with me. No one speaks for you but you. I will only make sure they listen." Eliza searched his face, trying to find the bargain hidden beneath the kindness. She did not find one. That scared her more than cruelty might have. Upstairs, she stood a long time in the doorway of the children's room. May slept with one arm flung over her head. Toby had lost his blanket to the floor. Eliza tucked it back around him, then looked out the narrow window toward the porch below. Silas was there now, a dark shape in a chair, staring over the pasture toward the ridge line as if he had taken her trouble onto his own land and meant to watch it all night. She should have felt trapped. Instead, for the first time in months, she felt the edge of something more dangerous than fear: relief. The courtroom in Pine Bend smelled of wet wool, old paper, and men who thought power sat best on their shoulders. Eliza felt it the moment she stepped inside. Heads turned. Conversations thinned. A few people did not bother lowering their voices at all. That is her. Mercer married her already. Convenient. She kept her chin up and her steps even. May and Toby had been left with Reverend Pike's sister that morning, though Toby had cried when she walked away. The sound of it still sat in her chest. Silas walked beside her, hat in hand, silent as stone. He had not touched her once on the ride into town. He had not needed to. His presence carried its own weight. The man trying to take her land was named Horace Bell, thick in the middle, red around the neck, and smug in the way of men who had spent too long getting their way. He stood beside the judge's clerk with one thumb hooked in his vest, as if the whole thing were already finished. When he saw Silas, that look shifted. Not gone, just sharper. "I didn't expect Mercer to come play husband so fast," Horace said. Silas did not answer him. Eliza did. "You expected me to fold faster than that." A few people near the back glanced up from the benches. Horace gave her a thin smile. "Widows say many things before winter teaches them sense." Eliza stepped closer, keeping her hands calm at her sides. "You burned my barn in August. If winter wanted to teach me fear, it should have come sooner." That wiped some of the amusement from his face. Good. Let him feel watch for once. The hearing itself moved slowly, like a cartwheel stuck in mud. The judge read both deeds in a voice so flat it seemed made to drain truth from the room. Horace's lawyer spoke first. He called Eliza's paper irregular. He spoke of boundary confusion, of missing survey marks, of misunderstandings that somehow always favored his client. Eliza listened until her nails bit into her own palms. Then it was her turn. She stood. The room seemed to tilt, then settle. Silas remained seated beside her, broad shoulders still, eyes forward. He had said he would let her speak for herself. He kept that promise. "My husband bought that tract in good faith," she said. "He paid in full. The man who sold it signed before 2 witnesses, one of them now dead, the other in Helena. My husband built a barn there, dug post holes there, buried our milk cow beside the east fence after a fever took her. Men do not bury stock on land they do not mean to keep." The judge looked over his spectacles. "And after your husband's death?" "Mr. Bell came within a week, said a woman alone had no use for ridge pasture, said he would be generous if I signed it over. I refused. 3 nights later my barn burned." The room had gone quieter now. The judge asked, "Can you prove the fire was set by him?" "No, men like him rarely dirty their own hands." Horace barked a laugh. "Careful, ma'am." She turned toward him fully. "Careful is how women like me stay alive." There it was, not volume, not tears, just truth spoken plain. The kind people remembered after they left a room. Silas finally rose when the clerk called for the survey notes. He handed over a packet Eliza had never seen before. "I sent for copies from Helena last week," he said. "Bell's deed uses a creek bend that no longer exists. The original flood shifted it 6 years ago. Mrs. Mercer holds the older description and the more accurate line." The judge studied the papers for a long minute. Horace's lawyer began to speak, then stopped when the judge lifted a hand. By noon the decision was made. The land was hers, Not Belle's, not the judge's to bend. Hers. The sound in the room changed at once. It did not rise loud. It moved like a ripple through cloth. Surprise, displeasure, curiosity. Eliza sat back down because her knees had weakened under her. Silas placed one hand on the edge of the bench beside her, close enough to steady if needed but not touching. He understood pride better than most. Outside the courthouse, the wind felt sharper, cleaner. Eliza stood on the steps with the ruling folded in her hand and stared out at Pine Bend's muddy street as if seeing it from a different distance. "That should have felt better," she said. Silas settled his hat back on his head. "Because you won. Because men like Belle don't lose quiet." "No, they don't." She looked at him. "You knew that when you married me." "I knew he'd push harder after." "And you still did it." His gaze stayed on the street. "I don't do half work." That answer should not have warmed her. It did. They had nearly reached the wagon when a stone struck the wheel spoke with a hard crack. Both of them turned. A boy stood at the far corner, maybe 12, maybe less, hat too big for his head. Then he bolted. Silas crossed the street in 3 long strides and caught the folded scrap the boy had left behind. He opened it, read it. His face did not change, which frightened Eliza more than anger might have. "What is it?" He handed her the note. "Leave the ridge or bury the little ones by it." For a moment the letters swam. Her breath turned cold in her chest. She read it again to make sure the words were not worse than her fear. They were exactly that bad. Silas took the paper back and folded it once. "Get in the wagon." Her voice came out thinner than she liked. "That was meant for me. It was meant to frighten you. It worked." He looked at her then, straight and steady. "Good, fear keeps people alive. Panic gets them killed, so get in." The ride home was quiet except for the wagon wheels and Toby's name beating in her head, though he was miles away and safe. She wanted to ask what came next. She wanted to demand he tell her this had all been worth it. Instead, she held the bench with both hands and watched the land roll past in hard strips of brown and gold. When they reached the ranch, May ran from the porch before the horses had fully stopped. Toby followed, slower, one boot half unlaced. Eliza climbed down so fast her skirt caught on the step. She dropped to her knees and pulled them both into her arms. May laughed from the force of it. Toby complained he could not breathe. Eliza held them anyway. From over their heads she saw Silas speaking to one of his ranch hands near the barn. Short words, sharp gestures. The man saddled up within minutes and rode west. That evening the house felt smaller, though nothing in it had changed. Eliza checked the window latches twice. She laid May and Toby in the same bed and sat with them till they slept. When she finally came downstairs, Silas was at the hearth cleaning a rifle with the kind of calm that belonged to habit. "You carry that every night?" she asked. "When I need to." She stood beside the mantel, arms folded tight. "Tell me plain, how much danger did I bring here?" His hands did not stop moving. "Less than the danger that already knew where to find you." "That isn't an answer." He set the cloth aside and looked up. "Belle won't come at me through the front gate. He'll try weakness, fire, fences, livestock, children if he thinks he can get away with it." Her stomach twisted. "You say that like the weather." "I say it like a fact." Anger rose through the fear because anger was easier to stand inside. "Then perhaps you should have let me fail alone." He stood, "No." The word landed hard between them. She stared at him. "You don't get to decide what risk other people bear for me." His face tightened, not in rage, but in something older and meaner. "I decided the moment I watched you walk across that street with 2 children and no shield but nerve. You were already in it. So was I the second I said yes." The fire popped. Somewhere upstairs a floorboard creaked as the house settled. Eliza lowered her voice. "I have buried 2 husbands." His expression shifted then. "Not much, enough, I know." She had never told him that part in full. He must have heard it from town talk or guessed from the tired look in her bones. Either way, the knowledge of it sat heavy now. "I can't do it again," she said. He took one step closer. "Then don't." Her laugh came out unsteady. That isn't a promise. It's the only one I can make. I won't walk toward danger careless. I won't leave you blind to it. And I won't let Belle frighten you off this land. You say my land. It is your land. She shook her head. You stand over every part of it now. His eyes held hers in the firelight. Then maybe that's what marriage is. The words struck deeper than they should have in a marriage built from need. She looked away first. Later, long after the children had gone still upstairs, she found him on the porch with the rifle across his knees. The night had gone cold. The cottonwoods whispered near the creek. He did not turn when she stepped out beside him, but he shifted the blanket folded near the chair so it would not collect dew. A small thing. A place made for her without being offered. She sat anyway. For a while they listened to the dark. At last she said, "When my second husband died, I thought that was the end of asking anything from life. Just food, shelter, a way to keep the children breathing, nothing more." Silas looked out over the pasture. That seems wise. It felt empty. He gave a low sound that might have been agreement. She pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Were you ever close to marrying before?" "No. Not once. Women wanted the ranch, or the story of the ranch, not me." "You sound sure." "I am." She turned and studied the side of his face. "And what do you think I wanted?" At that he finally looked at her. The moonlight caught in his eyes and made them seem paler than they were by day. "A witness," he said. "You told me plain." She nodded slowly. "And what did you want?" His jaw worked once. "I thought a house with children in it might sound different from a house without them." That answer took the air from her. He had not said it tenderly. He had said it like a man confessing to hunger after pretending he had none. Inside, a door clicked softly upstairs. One of the children turning in sleep, no more than that. Still, both of them listened. When Eliza spoke again, her voice was softer. "It does sound different." "Yes. Do you like it?" He looked back toward the house. "Too much." She should have gone inside then. Instead she stayed until the chill reached her bones and he walked her to the door without touching her. At the threshold she paused. He stood close enough that she could smell cedar smoke on his coat. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For coming to court. For not speaking over me. For frightening me less than I expected to be frightened by a man." Something almost like humor touched his face and vanished. "That is a strange kind of praise." "It is the kind I have." He inclined his head. "Then I'll take it." Upstairs she lay awake longer than she meant to. Not because of Belle. Not even because of the note. Those fears were plain and harsh and easy to name. What kept her awake was the look on Silas's face when he said the house sounded different with children in it. What kept her awake was the small, dangerous thought that perhaps this marriage was already turning into something harder to survive than fear. Hope. The first snow did not come yet, but the cold arrived like a warning. By the second week of October, the mornings on the Mercer ranch had a thin white edge to them. Ice glazed the water bucket by dawn. The horses breathed smoke into the air. Eliza rose before sunrise and built the fire while the house still held the quiet of sleep. She liked those first minutes alone. The scrape of kindling, the low crack of flame, the smell of coffee beginning to wake in the pot. It gave her the feeling that the day had not decided anything cruel yet. May came down first most mornings. She was 7, sharp-eyed, and already too careful in ways a child should not be. She had begun helping without being asked. Folding blankets, sweeping the porch, watching Toby when Eliza's hands were busy. Toby was 5 and softer in the heart, though stubborn when it suited him. He had claimed the far corner by the hearth for his wooden horse, and a little pile of stones he called his herd. Silas stepped around that corner now as if it had always belonged to the boy. Small changes had crept in without asking leave. Silas no longer ate at the far end of the table. He sat nearer the center where Toby could show him pebbles and bits of string as if they were gold. May had stopped going silent when he entered a room. She still watched him, but now it was with thought instead of fear. Eliza saw these things and tried not to give them more meaning than they had earned. She failed more each day. One morning, She was hanging washed shirts behind the house when she saw Silas ride in from the south pasture earlier than usual. Something in the pace of the horse set her still. He dismounted hard. His coat sleeve was torn near the shoulder and there was blood dark on the cloth. She dropped the wet shirt at once. What happened? Nothing worth the fuss. That much blood says otherwise. He started toward the porch as if he meant to brush past it with silence. Eliza stepped in front of him. She had to tip her chin up to hold his gaze, but she did not move. Sit down. His eyes narrowed. You ordering me now, Mrs. Mercer? Only when you're bleeding on my porch. For one long second she thought he might refuse out of pure habit. Then he gave a tired breath and sat on the bench by the door. Eliza went inside for the basin. Her hands were steady until she came back and saw how deep the cut really was. Not a bullet, knife or wire. Long and angry across the upper arm, May had appeared in the doorway behind her. Mama. Eliza looked back. Take Toby to the kitchen, keep him there. May nodded without argument. That frightened Eliza almost as much as the blood. She knelt beside Silas and cut the torn sleeve away with the sewing shears. He watched her with a stillness that said he was measuring every touch. Not because he feared pain, because he was unused to being tended. Fence staple, he said at last, pulled loose when the gelding spooked. She cleaned the wound in silence. The water pinked at once. Silas did not flinch, though his jaw grew hard enough to show at the hinge. You lying to spare me or to spare yourself? She asked. His eyes dropped to her face. Bell's men were riding the south line. There it was, and they didn't cross. But they wanted you to know they were close. Yes. Her hands paused, then went back to work. You should have said that first. You asked what happened, that happened. She tied the bandage tight. You have a talent for making danger sound dull. I find panic unhelpful. She leaned back on her heels and looked at him. I am not panicking. I am deciding how angry I mean to be. That almost pulled a smile from him, almost. It made something in her chest loosen against her will. When she stood to carry the basin away, his hand closed gently around her wrist. She stopped. His touch was warm, calloused, and brief. Still, it was the first time he had reached for her without need. Thank you, he said. The words were simple. The way he said them was not. That afternoon he did not ride back out. He sat at the table with the ledger open while Toby lined up stones near his elbow and May practiced her letters on scrap paper. Eliza needed bread and felt his presence the way one felt weather inside a room. Not always seen, always there. Once, when she glanced up, she found him watching the children with that same unreadable look he had carried in town the day she first asked for his name. Only now it was softer around the edges, as if the watching itself had changed him. Near dusk, a rider came up the lane. Silas was on his feet before the knock came. Eliza wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the door just behind him. The man outside was lean, rough-faced, and dusted gray with road dirt. A scar cut through one eyebrow. His coat hung open despite the cold, and his hat looked like it had survived more storms than most men. You planning to leave me standing here, Mercer? He asked. Silas opened the door wider. Depends who rode you in. The man gave a short laugh and stepped inside, still friendly as a snake in a grain sack. His name was Gideon Vale. Eliza learned that by supper. He and Silas had once ridden herd together north of Missoula before Silas struck silver and bought land. Gideon carried himself like a man who belonged nowhere for long but knew how to survive anywhere. He took in Eliza, then the children, then the room, and one eyebrow rose. So it's true, he said. You married. Silas pulled out a chair. Sit down or ride on. Gideon sat. At the table, May studied the visitor with open interest. Toby leaned against Eliza's arm and refused to speak. Gideon ate like a man who did not trust the next meal to be near. When he had finished half his stew and 2 biscuits, he wiped his mouth and got to the point. Bell's hired a surveyor, he said. Not for the court, for winter line work. Silas's expression did not change. He's trying to move the fences before snow. That'd be my guess. Eliza set down the spoon she had been drying. Can he do that now? The judge ruled. Gideon glanced at her. Men like Belle don't always care what a judge says if the weather can hide their tracks. Silence settled over the table. The children felt it. May lowered her eyes to her plate. Toby pressed closer. Silas asked, how many men? 4 that I saw, maybe more by next week. Armed? Gideon snorted, you know Belle. Silas nodded once. No wasted motion, no wasted worry, but Eliza had begun to recognize the small signs. The way his thumb pressed once against the wood grain of the table. The way his shoulders seemed to hold a little higher when danger came near. After supper, Eliza put the children to bed while the men spoke in low tones by the fire. May caught her sleeve before she left the room. Are we moving again? The question hit like a blow. Eliza knelt at once beside the bed. No. How do you know? Because I cannot bear it, she thought. Because I have nothing left to pack. Because this house has started to feel like breath after drowning. Instead, she touched May's cheek and said, because this is our home. May searched her face a long moment, then nodded and lay back down. Toby was already asleep with one fist curled under his chin. When Eliza returned downstairs, Gideon had gone out to the porch to smoke. Silas stood by the mantel, one hand braced there, head bent. For the first time since she had known him, he looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. She stopped beside the table. Tell me what comes next. He straightened. I'll send for the survey records in Helena. Gideon can ride north at dawn. I'll put 2 extra men on the ridge line. And me. His gaze moved to her. You stay here with the children. Her chin lifted. No. The word was quiet. It landed anyway. He pushed away from the mantel. Eliza. No, I did not marry you so I could sit inside and wait for men to decide my life from horseback. This isn't court. No, it's worse. His eyes hardened. Exactly. She stepped closer. The lamp light threw both their shadows long across the floorboards. Then stop talking to me like I don't know what danger is. I'm talking to you like someone who matters. That stopped her for a beat, only a beat. Then treat me that way. The air between them seemed to narrow. Behind her, Gideon's boots scraped once on the porch boards and moved away, giving them the room he pretended not to notice. Silas lowered his voice. What do you want from me right now? The truth. He held her gaze. Fine. I want you out of Belle's reach, because the thought of him using you or those children against me makes it hard to think straight. She stared at him. He had said it plain, too plain to take back. The fire cracked. Somewhere upstairs the pipes gave a soft groan against the cold. At last she said, quieter now, that sounds personal. It is. Her breath caught. She hated that he could do that with one honest word. What am I to you? She asked before pride could stop her. His face changed, not much, but enough to show the answer mattered. More than I planned. She had no defense ready for that, none at all. He came one step closer, not touching, not yet. Close enough that she could see the faint scar near his chin, the one she had noticed before but never asked about. When you came to town, he said, I thought I was doing a hard thing for a practical reason. I thought you'd take the name, keep the house, win the land, and leave when spring made leaving easy. She swallowed. Did you want that? No. The word came faster than the first. It felt like something pulled from deeper down. Outside, the wind moved across the porch with a low, dry hiss. Eliza looked at his bandaged arm, then back at his face. You should have said that sooner. I've not had much practice saying what matters. A weak laugh escaped her. No, you truly have not. His mouth shifted then. Not a full smile. Enough to make him seem less distant and more dangerous all at once. She should have stepped back. Instead, she said, when this started, I came here needing a witness. And now? Now I wait for your boots at dusk. Now my children sleep easier when you are in the house. Now every room feels different when you enter it, but she could not give him all that at once. Now, I don't know what name to put on it. His voice lowered. You don't have to tonight. She nodded. That was mercy. Maybe the first true mercy either of them had offered the other. A little later, Gideon came back in, smelling of tobacco and cold air. He looked from one of them to the other and said nothing, which told Eliza he had seen enough. Before bed, Silas checked every window latch and every door bar himself. Eliza stood at the foot of the stairs watching him do it, not because she doubted he would. Because care, when it was given without performance, had begun to undo her in places fear never reached. When he finished, he turned toward her. They stood in the low light with the whole quiet house around them. Sleep in the children's room tonight, he said. I'll take the chair outside their door. She frowned. You'll freeze. I've sat through worse. Something stubborn rose in her. Then take my room. It's closer to theirs and it has a real bed. He blinked once, as if the offer had landed where he was not ready for it. I won't have you out in a chair while I lie warm under quilts, she said. Not after bleeding on my porch and pretending it was nothing. For a second he just looked at her, then he inclined his head. All right. She turned before he could see how hard her heart had begun to beat. That night after May and Toby were settled, Eliza lay awake on the narrow bed beside them and listened to the sounds of the house. A board creaked once in her room above. Then silence. Not empty silence, held silence, shared silence. She closed her eyes and saw him standing by the fire saying, more than I planned. It should have frightened her more. Instead, for the first time since her second husband's grave, she let herself imagine what it might mean to stay. Gideon rode out before sunrise with a bedroll, a tin cup, and Silas's shortest instructions. Snow had not fallen yet, but the sky had gone the dull color that came before it. The kind that pressed low over the ridges and made every sound seem to travel farther than it should. Eliza watched from the porch while he disappeared down the north trail. When she turned back, Silas was already at the woodpile splitting kindling one-handed because of the bandage on his arm. She went down the steps at once. You are not doing that. He brought the axe down clean through another log. Seems I am. You tore that arm open 3 days ago. It still works. She reached for the handle when he raised it again. He stopped only because she put herself too close to the swing. His eyes narrowed. Move. No. For a moment they stood there in the cold, the axe between them, the breath from both their mouths turning white in the air. Then Silas exhaled through his nose and lowered the handle. You are hard to manage, he said, so I have been told. He let go of the axe. She took it from him, set it aside, and pointed toward the porch with a look no hired hand would have dared give him. He did not argue. That alone said something. Inside, the children were eating oats by the stove. May looked up as Eliza came in behind Silas. Did Mama win? She asked. Silas pulled out a chair and sat with a grunt that he probably hoped sounded casual. Against me, again. Toby smiled around his spoon. Mama always wins. Eliza hid her face for a second at the cupboard, so the children would not see her smile. By the time she turned back, Silas had one hand around a coffee cup, and Toby had begun lining up dried beans beside his plate in careful little rows. The house looked ordinary, warm, safe. That was what frightened her now. Not the lack of danger, but the fact that she had begun to want this small piece so badly. Later that morning, while May practiced reading at the table, and Toby made wagon tracks through the flour dust on the floorboards, Eliza found Silas in the back room studying a rolled map. The room had once been used for storage. Now half the shelves held jars she had filled, folded linens, and spare lamp wicks. His rifle leaned against the wall within easy reach. You sent Gideon for papers, she said. Survey copies, boundary notes, anything Belle might try to twist. She walked closer. And if the papers are not enough. His finger traced a line on the map. Then we make it too costly for him to test us. She folded her arms. That sounds like a man expecting trouble. I am. She was quiet a moment, then she asked, What happened to the scar on your chin? It was not what she had planned to say. His eyes rose from the map to her face. He touched the scar once with the side of his thumb as if he had forgotten it was there. Fence post, he said. She arched a brow. You lie very simply. He looked back down. My father. The room went still. She had never heard him speak that word with anything but absence around it. Now it lay between them like a stone turned up by a plow. She waited. He did not seem like a man who had often been waited for kindly. He drank, Silas said at last. When I was 14, he took offense to the way I looked at him. Broke a bottle, missed my throat by an inch. His mouth flattened. I left that night, slept in a freight shed 3 towns over, never went back. Eliza felt the shift inside her before she understood it. Not pity, something deeper, a hard ache for the boy he had been and the man he had made himself into without help. You built all this after that. He gave one short nod. Alone. Mostly. She stepped nearer the map table. That is why you live the way you do. He looked at her, meaning. You keep everything tight, ordered, quiet, nothing loose enough to break. A strange expression crossed his face. Not surprise exactly. Recognition, perhaps. That sounds like something you've known yourself. She looked away then because yes, she had 2 husbands buried, one by fever, one by falling timber in a storm. Each time people had watched her with the same question in their eyes. What will she do now? She had learned to answer it with her back straight and her hands busy. My first husband was kind, she said. Weak but kind. He followed other men too easily. My second was stronger, less soft. He bought the Cold Creek land because he wanted one thing in life that belonged to us and not to whoever shouted loudest. She rested her fingers on the edge of the table. He died before he could finish a fence line. The tree came down wrong in spring thaw. I had sawdust in my hair when they told me. Toby was still nursing. Silas said nothing. He never rushed grief. That was another of his quiet mercies. I buried one dream after another, she said. And after enough of that, a woman stops asking life to be gentle. She only asks where to stand. His voice came low, and now. She lifted her eyes to his. Now I am standing here. They stayed that way longer than either should have. Then May called from the kitchen that Toby had put a bean in his nose, and the spell broke with such force Eliza nearly laughed. By noon, the sky had darkened more. Silas went to the barn to check the tack and Eliza set stew to simmer. May shelled peas by the window. Toby had been warned about beans and given a strip of leather to braid instead. The rhythm of the day calmed her until hoofbeats sounded fast in the yard. Silas was at the door before she reached it. Gideon came up the steps breathing hard, horse lathered, hat gone, one cheek raw from wind. They've started, he said. Silas pulled him inside. Where? East Ridge, 2 men moving posts, 2 more near the creek. Bell wasn't there, but his foreman was. Eliza felt the blood leave her face. In daylight. Gideon glanced at her. Daylight suits men who think no one will stop them. Silas was already reaching for his coat. She caught his sleeve before he could turn. You are not going alone. His gaze dropped to her hand, then back to her face. Eliza. No, the word came strong. You told me I matter, then stop shutting me out the second this becomes real. This is not your fight on horseback. It is my land. Gideon, wise enough to know a line of fire when he saw one, quietly moved toward the stove and stayed there. Silas lowered his voice. If Bell's men see you at the ridge, they may think they can scare you off it. She stepped closer, then let them see they cannot. For one hard second he looked almost angry, not at her, at the world for requiring this of her at all. Then his shoulders shifted. You stay behind me. No. His jaw tightened. Eliza. I ride beside you or I follow after. Choose whichever makes you less miserable. Gideon made a small sound that might have been a cough hiding laughter. Silas shot him one look. Gideon busied himself with nothing. At last Silas said, Saddle the bay mare. Eliza was already moving. The ride to the East Ridge cut through wind so sharp it stung her eyes. She had not ridden out with purpose since before her second husband died. The feel of the reins in her hands woke old strength and old fear together. Silas kept close on her left. Gideon rode on the right. No one wasted breath on talk. They found the men exactly where Gideon said. One near the creek bank driving a fresh post into thaw-soft ground. Another hauling wire. Two more by the rise, rifles slung as if this were ordinary ranch work. Bell's foreman, Reuben Shaw, straightened first when he saw them. "Afternoon, Mercer." Silas reined in 10 paces short. "You're on Mercer land." Shaw smiled thinly. "Looks to me like Bell land." Eliza rode forward before Silas could stop her. She kept the mare steady, though her heart was striking hard enough to hurt. "The court ruled 6 days ago," she said. "You know it. Pull your posts." The men looked at her, then at one another. One laughed under his breath. Shaw spat into the grass. "You should be home minding children, ma'am." Eliza felt the old fear rise. Then something stronger rose with it. She pointed at the half-driven post. "You put one more stake in this ground, and I'll swear before every judge between here and Helena that I saw you trespass in full daylight after a lawful ruling. Then I'll see whether Bell enjoys paying lawyers through winter." Shaw's smile faded a little. He had expected tears, maybe pleading, not a woman who sounded ready to drag his name through every town in the territory. Silas spoke then, calm and deadly quiet. "And if the law fails to interest you, I can explain it another way." No one moved. The wind ran through the dry grass below the ridge. The creek gave a dull, cold shine. Eliza could hear her mare's breath, could hear her own, could hear faintly Gideon sliding his rifle from the saddle scabbard without flourish. At last Shaw jerked his chin at the others. "Pull them." One man hesitated. Shaw barked louder, "Now." They yanked up the new posts and dropped them in the wagon bed. No one looked happy about it. Good. Let them carry that bitterness home. Let Bell know he had not frightened anyone off. As Shaw turned his horse, he paused long enough to look at Eliza again. "This ain't finished." She held his gaze. "No, it isn't. So tell your boss to come himself next time." He rode off with the others. Only when they were gone did Eliza realize how badly her hands had begun to shake. She tightened them on the reins till it eased. Silas turned toward her. His face was unreadable for a moment. Then he said, "You should not have ridden ahead." "And yet it worked." "That does not make it wise." She looked at him, wind-dread and breathing hard. "You married a woman who crossed a town street to bargain for her life. Wisdom was never the first thing on offer." Gideon laughed out loud then, a rough, startled sound. Silas looked at him once, then back at Eliza. Something shifted in his face. Pride, maybe, fear still. Something warmer tangled in with both. On the ride home they said little. They did not need to. The land stretched around them in long brown folds, waiting for snow. When the house came into view, Eliza felt a weariness settle into her bones, but beneath it was something steady. That night, after the children slept and Gideon rolled himself in a blanket near the kitchen stove, Eliza stepped out onto the porch. Silas followed a minute later. He shut the door softly behind him. For a while they stood side by side with the cold night pressing close. Then he said, "When Shaw looked at you, I wanted to break his jaw." She let out a small breath. That would have spoiled the legal tone of the afternoon. A sound left him then, low and brief. Real amusement. She turned toward it. It made him seem younger, more human than the silent ranch King Black Hollow had built out of rumor. Then his hand came to rest on the porch rail beside hers, not touching, close enough to change the air. "You were brave today," he said. "I was terrified." "They are not opposites." She looked at his hand, then at his face. "Were you terrified?" "Yes." That answer undid her more than praise would have. She had no shield against a man honest in his fear. "For me?" She asked softly. His eyes settled on hers. "For all of you." She should have looked away. She did not. The silence between them deepened, rich and dangerous and full. When he reached up and brushed one loose strand of hair back from her cheek, the touch was so gentle it felt almost unreal. "Go inside," he said, voice rougher now, "before I forget what kind of man I meant to be." Her breath caught. "And what kind is that?" "One who gives you time." The answer was not what she expected. It was better. She stepped back first because staying might have changed everything too soon. At the door she turned. He had not moved. The night framed him in shadow and pale starlight, big and still and carrying more feeling than he knew how to say. Inside, she leaned against the closed door for a long moment. Her heart would not settle, not from the ride, not from the danger, from him. And for the first time, she knew with painful clarity that if this house ever asked her to leave, it would not just be land she lost. It would be love. The snow came 2 nights later, thick and wet at first, then dry and sharp by morning. It gathered along the porch rail, filled the wagon ruts, and turned the far pasture white clear to the cottonwoods. By noon the ranch looked softer than it was. Eliza knew better now. Winter on good land could still bury a family if it pleased. Inside the house, the stove stayed hot from dawn till dark. May read near the fire with her feet tucked under her. Toby carved deep roads into a patch of packed snow on the porch with a stick until Eliza dragged him in by the scarf and set him to drying beans at the table. Gideon remained one more day, then another, sleeping near the kitchen stove and riding the fence lines with Silas before sunup. He never explained why he stayed. Silas never asked him to. Men like them had their own way of saying yes. On the third morning, Eliza found Silas in the barn before breakfast, fitting a lantern to a hook near the tack wall. Snow dusted his hat brim and shoulders. The cold air made the inside of the barn smell like hay, leather, and horses waking slow. "You did not sleep much," she said. He tightened the hook with one hand. "Enough. You keep saying that as if I cannot see your face." He glanced at her then. "What does it say?" "That you are trying to carry a whole winter in one pair of shoulders." He let out a breath that turned white between them. "That sounds uncomfortable." "It sounds foolish." A tiny shift touched his mouth, not quite a smile, enough. She stepped closer, careful of the straw underfoot. "How long is Gideon staying?" "Till the ridge settles." "The ridge is not going to settle." "No." He looked past her toward the open barn door where the snow lay bright and untouched for a few yards before the yard showed tracks. But Belle may grow impatient before Christmas, and impatient men make mistakes. Eliza folded her arms against the cold. "You are waiting for him." "I am preparing for him." She knew the difference. Waiting was passive. Preparing was a man with spare rifles cleaned, horses half-saddled, and hired hands told to keep their eyes open. "What happens when he makes the mistake?" she asked. Silas hung the lantern and turned toward her. "Then I end it." The way he said it made her heart knock once hard, not because he sounded cruel, because he sounded certain. That afternoon, a letter came from town with the post rider. Eliza knew the hand before she broke the seal. Her uncle in Kentucky. The same slanted writing, the same careful pressure on the page as if each word cost him effort. She read it at the kitchen table while May shelled nuts nearby and Toby hummed to himself over a tin soldier with one arm missing. By the second line, the room had gone thin around her. Silas came in from outside carrying a crate of salt blocks. He saw her face and set the crate down at once. "What is it?" She handed him the letter because she could not yet trust her voice. He read in silence. Her uncle had heard she was married again. Heard also that she lived far off in Montana with no proper kin around her. He wrote that Vera and Toby would be better raised back east among blood relatives and decent church people. He wrote that a woman with Eliza's history ought not burden a new husband with another man's children. He wrote that he was willing, out of Christian duty, to arrange their travel come spring. Silas folded the paper once. Then again. May had stopped shelling nuts. "Mama." Eliza stood up too fast, the chair legs scraped. "Nothing you need fret over." May's eyes flicked to the letter. She was old enough to hear what was not said. Toby asked, Are we going somewhere? No. Eliza's answer came sharp, then softened at once. She knelt beside him and put both hands on his small shoulders. No, sweetheart, not anywhere. This is home. He searched her face, accepted it because children must accept something, and went back to his soldier. May did not. She kept watching. After the children were sent upstairs to fetch more kindling, Eliza turned on Silas with the force of all she had held tight. I will not send them. He looked almost offended. Did I say you would? No, but men write such things because other men sometimes agree. His eyes darkened. I am not other men. The words hit with such weight she had to look away. He stepped closer and set the folded letter on the table between them like something distasteful. Those children stay here, he said. No court, no cousin, no preacher, and no blood relation from Kentucky is taking them from this house. She stared at him. You speak as if you have a claim. He held her gaze. I do. A silence stretched, not empty, trembling. Because of me, she asked, because of all of us. The children came clattering back down before she could answer. May brought too much kindling in both arms. Toby carried one piece like a trophy. Eliza took the wood from them and busied her hands at the stove because if she stood still she might cry, and she would not do that in front of the children. Not for a letter. Not for a man finally saying aloud what she had barely let herself hope. That night the storm rose hard after sunset. Wind struck the walls in long, rough shoves. Snow hissed against the windows. Gideon had gone back out to the line before dusk and had not yet returned. Silas checked the barn twice, then came in carrying more wood and the bitter smell of the storm. By the time May and Toby were asleep, the whole house seemed wrapped in white noise and darkness. Eliza stood by the upstairs window looking toward the yard when a lantern bobbed once near the gate and then vanished. Silas. He was beside her in 2 strides. I saw something. He looked out, waited, there, again, a quick light, then gone. His face changed at once. He reached for his coat and rifle. Stay with the children. She followed him to the hall. Is it Gideon? Maybe. Maybe not. No. He started down the stairs. She caught the rail and called after him, low so the children would not wake. Do not shut me out of this. He paused on the landing and looked back up at her. Even in the dim light she could see the strain in him. I need you here, he said, with them. Then he was gone. Eliza went at once into the children's room. May woke when she sat on the bed. What is it? Weather, Eliza lied. May listened to the wind and frowned in that old careful way. That isn't all. No, it never was. Eliza pulled both children close beneath the quilt and waited. Below, the front door opened and shut once. Then again, after a span of time too long to be measured by comfort. Voices rose outside, blurred by snow and distance. A horse screamed. Then a crack split the night. Gunfire. Toby jerked awake crying. May went stiff as wood in Eliza's arms. Every part of her body wanted to run to the window, to the porch, to wherever the danger had taken shape. Instead, she held the children tighter and forced her voice steady. Stay here. Mama, no. May grabbed her sleeve. Eliza cupped her face. Listen to me. Bar the door if anyone but me comes up those stairs. May's eyes widened. Then she nodded. Too brave, too young. Eliza took the poker from beside the stove downstairs and moved through the house with the blood pounding so loud in her ears it felt like another storm. The front door stood open a hand's width. Snow blew through the gap and melted dark on the floorboards. She stepped onto the porch. The yard was a blur of white and shadow. The barn lantern swung wild from its hook. Near the gate 2 horses thrashed and pulled. One man lay half under the fence. Another staggered near the trough, clutching his arm. Gideon's voice ripped across the wind from somewhere near the stable. Then Eliza saw Silas. He was on one knee in the snow by the hitch rail, rifle up, coat open, shouting something she could not hear. A third shape moved near the woodpile with a pistol in hand. Without thinking, Eliza raised the poker with both hands and ran off the porch. The man near the woodpile saw her too late. He turned halfway, startled by movement where he had expected none. She swung with every hard thing the last few years had put in her. The iron cracked against his wrist. The pistol flew into the snow. He cursed and lunged, but Silas was there a second later, hitting him low and hard enough to send both men to the ground. Then it was over almost as fast as it had begun. Gideon dragged the wounded rider from the fence. The third man groaned under Silas's boot. Snow kept falling as if none of it mattered. Silas rose and turned to Eliza. For one terrible second he only stared. Then he crossed the space between them and gripped her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. His hands tightened once. "Why did you come out here?" "Because gunfire was in my yard." His breath left him rough. The anger in his face broke apart under something stronger. Fear, relief, love so plain she could hardly stand under it. Gideon called from the gate, "This one lives, other one too for now." Silas did not look away from her. Snow clung to his hair. A cut ran hot and red along his cheek. "You should not have done that," he said. "And yet it worked," she whispered. A broken laugh came out of him. It turned into something unsteady. He looked down once, then back at her, as if whatever he had held shut for years had finally found no door strong enough. "I was halfway to losing my mind," he said. "Standing out here thinking of them getting inside, thinking of you at that window, thinking of one wrong second." His hand slid from her shoulders to her arms, steadying them both. "I love you, Eliza. I have for longer than I knew what to call it." The storm seemed to fall away from sound. She saw only him, the man who had married her for a name. The man who sat outside doors, brought wood without a word, made space at his table, claimed her children as his own, and looked more afraid of losing her than of any bullet Belle could send. "I know," she said, and it came out with tears she had not meant to give. "I love you too." He kissed her then, not like a bargain, not like gratitude, like a man coming home after too much winter. Snow melted on their faces. The yard was chaos. Gideon swore at a horse. One of Belle's men moaned in the drift. None of it mattered for that one long breath of a moment. When they broke apart, Silas rested his forehead against hers. "Go inside." "Only if you come with me." His mouth touched hers once more, softer this time. "I am not leaving this house tonight." "Good." Because neither was she. By morning the storm had eased to a slow white drift, and the Mercer ranch looked like a place the world had tried to bury and failed. Snow lay heavy on the porch roof. The barn doors were rimmed in ice. The yard still held the marks of the night before. Boot tracks, blood near the hitch rail, a broken fence slat half buried in white. Inside, the house was warm. Gideon had tied Belle's 2 surviving men in the feed shed until dawn, then ridden them into town with one of Silas's hands and enough witnesses to make lying difficult. The third man, the one Eliza had struck with the poker, had woken sick and snarling but alive. Good. Let him live long enough to answer for why he came armed into a yard where children slept. Silas washed the blood from his face at the kitchen basin while Eliza set coffee on the stove. The cut on his cheek was not deep, but it burned red against his skin. She stood in front of him with a cloth in one hand and vinegar in the other. "Sit." He sat. That still had the power to surprise her. She cleaned the cut in careful silence. He watched her the whole time, not speaking, not looking away. His eyes had changed overnight. The reserve was still there because it was stitched into him too deeply to vanish in one storm, but it no longer stood between them like a fence. It had opened. The feeling in his gaze now was plain enough to make her heart ache. "You stare too hard," she murmured. "I've lost years doing less than that." Her hand paused against his cheek. "Don't say things like that while I'm holding vinegar." Something low and warm left him, almost a laugh. She liked the sound more than she should have. It made the room feel younger. When she finished, she started to step back, but his hand caught lightly at her waist, not to stop her by force, only because he wanted her there. She stayed. "I should have said it sooner," he said. "What?" He looked at her the way a man might look at a road he had feared to take and finally found worth every mile. "That I loved you." She rested the cloth on the basin rim. Perhaps, but I was stubborn too. I kept pretending I only needed safety. And now I need you not to get shot in my yard again." That brought a real smile, brief but full. She had never seen one from him before. It changed his whole face. The hard lines stayed, but warmth moved under them. For one foolish second, she wanted to stand there all day and look at nothing else. The children ended that thought by thundering down the stairs. May stopped first when she saw them standing so near. Toby bumped into her from behind and nearly fell. Both children stared. Silas removed his hand from Eliza's waist, though not quickly enough to fool anyone. "Mama," May said carefully, "did the bad men go away?" "They did," Eliza answered, "for good." Toby asked. Silas rose and faced them. "For good enough." That was not a child's answer, but Toby accepted it because Silas had said it. May kept studying both their faces with a solemn little frown that reminded Eliza far too much of herself. Then Toby asked, "Can I have jam on my bread?" The world resumed. By noon, the sheriff arrived from town with cold ears, wet boots, and a face full of apology before he even reached the porch. He had Belle in custody. Two of Belle's hired riders had spoken fast once they saw how many people had witnessed the trouble at the Mercer place. The broken fence posts on the ridge, the threats, the night attack, all of it was beginning to gather into something even the county could not ignore. Eliza listened from the doorway while Silas spoke with the sheriff in the yard. She had expected satisfaction. Instead, she felt mostly tired. These men had stolen enough of her peace already. A jail cell would not hand it back. When Silas came in, stamping snow from his boots, she asked, "Will it hold?" He took off his gloves. "Belle may buy himself smaller trouble than he deserves, but he'll not come near this place again. Not openly." "That is not the same as never." "No," he met her eyes, "but it is enough for now." Enough for now. She understood that kind of answer. Much of life was built on it. The days that followed settled slowly. Gideon stayed through the week to help mend the fence line, then prepared to leave at last. On the morning he saddled up, May stood on the porch with Toby tucked under one arm, both bundled against the cold. Eliza carried Gideon a packet of biscuits wrapped in cloth. "You could stay till spring," she said. He took the bundle and shrugged. "I was never built for walls longer than a week." Toby frowned. "You slept here longer than that." Gideon crouched to eye level with him. "Then I've likely used up all my manners for the year." May, sharp as ever, looked past the joke. "You stayed because of us." Gideon glanced once toward Silas, who was tightening a cinch strap by the gate. "I stayed because some things are worth staying for when they finally show up." He rose before either child could ask more and touched 2 fingers to his hat. To Eliza he said, "You did well, Mrs. Mercer." She shook her head. "We did." His scarred face softened at that. "Yes, you did." He rode out under a pale winter sun, smaller and smaller against the white fields until the ridge took him. Christmas came quiet and lean. No grand feast, no parlor full of guests. Eliza baked 2 small pies from the last of the dried apples. May stitched Silas a handkerchief crooked at the corners but neat in spirit. Toby gave him a smooth stone he had polished with his own sleeve and declared it lucky. Silas accepted both gifts as if handed silver. In return, he brought out 2 small boxes on Christmas morning. One held a red ribbon for May. The other held a little brass compass for Toby, though the boy could not yet tell east from west and did not care. For Eliza, he gave nothing at breakfast. She told herself that did not matter. Then after supper he asked her to come with him to the back room. She followed. In one corner stood the old shelves. In another stood a new work table he had built without a word, smooth-planed, sturdy. The wall beside it had been opened into a wider space, just enough for more light from the side window. Her soap mold sat there already. So did the cedar keepsake box he had given her weeks before. Beside it lay a folded paper. "What is this?" she asked. "A deed." Her breath caught. He stepped closer. "I had the records drawn proper in both our names. The Mercer Ranch house, the lower pasture, the creek bend, and the east fields, all of it. Not because it was needed for court, because it is true." She stared at the paper, then at him. Silas. You asked me once whether you stood behind me or beside me. His voice lowered. I should have answered better. Her eyes burned before she could stop them. She took the paper with careful fingers because her hands had begun to tremble. No man has ever given me something without asking what it buys, she said. His expression changed. Hurt touched it, not because of what she meant toward him, but because he knew exactly what kind of life had taught her that line. Then learn a new custom, he said quietly. This buys nothing. It names what already is. She set the deed down before she crushed it by accident. Then she stepped into him and held on. He wrapped both arms around her at once, strong and certain and almost reverent. She could feel his heart beating under her cheek. Steady. Home. That winter passed. Then the thaw came, slow and muddy. Spring pushed green through the pasture. May planted peas with fierce concentration. Toby followed Silas so closely around the barn that sometimes the two of them seemed tied by an invisible rope. The lawsuits faded. Belle vanished into the background of other men's talk. The ranch kept moving because work did not stop for joy or sorrow. On a bright morning in late June, a year after Eliza first rode into Black Hollow with dust in her hair and fear in her mouth, Silas took her to the rise above Cold Creek where the grass bent soft in the wind. From there they could see both pieces of the life they had joined, her old tract with its repaired barn and fresh fence, his broad pasture beyond. The house roof shone in the distance. May and Toby were near the garden below, small figures darting in and out of sunlight. Silas had built a bench there, plain wood, strong legs. No ornament, exactly like him. I thought you might like to sit where you can see all of it, he said. She sat. He sat beside her. For a while neither spoke. They had grown good at sharing silence without using it to hide. At last she said, "The first time I came to town, I thought I was asking for a shield." He looked out over the land. You were. Now I think I asked for a witness, because some part of me wanted someone to see I was still standing. His hand found hers on the bench between them. I saw you. She turned to him. There was no distance left in his face now, no guarded stranger, just the man who had chosen her again and again in chores, storms, danger, and quiet. And I saw you, she said. He leaned in and kissed her slow, with the warmth of a promise already proven. Below them, Toby shouted about a runaway chicken. May answered with the bossy patience of an older sister. The creek moved through the bend. The wind touched the grass. Life carried on. That was the miracle of it, not that love had come in thunder, that it had come in steady hands, open doors, shared land, children laughing in the next room, and two tired people choosing each other until choosing became the shape of home. And this